when Dad came to visit. Louise Pearson sent this account of her astonishing, probably life-saving connection with her deceased father that took place on Saturday, December 14th, 2024. Louise, who lives in Melbourne, Australia, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in June of 2021. Contrary to all expectations, she had survived the first 18 months. After going through various treatments, by the time her story took place, she had lived almost 3.5 years with the disease. She was still working and enjoying life, supported by family and friends. Louise also explained that she is totally blind. When she was 10 months old, she was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, a cancer affecting both of her eyes, which had to be removed. In late 2024, at the age of 55, Louise had recently lost both of her parents, leaving just herself and her supportive older brother. 2 weeks before her amazing experience, she had been trialled on a different chemotherapy which had caused her dire gut problems, and so by Friday the 13th of December, she was feeling listless and unwell. She couldn't keep her food down and felt constantly dehydrated. She took the day off her work as a private counsellor, but felt well enough by afternoon to see her physiotherapist and do some swimming. That night she spoke to her brother and to a close friend, and was hoping to feel better the next day. However, when she awoke the next morning, she was feeling much weaker. She got up and lurched across her bedroom floor and into her bathroom, noticing that cognitively she was feeling slow, like she was struggling to put her thoughts together. Within 20 minutes, she knew that she could not work again that day. When standing up, she fell flat on her face without warning, then staggered back to bed, thinking that sleeping it off would help. She awoke very aware that her guide dog Arthur needed to be let out and then fed his breakfast. Eventually, she dragged herself downstairs, deliberately leaving her phone behind due to concern that she might drop it, although later realizing that was exactly what she needed. Downstairs, she fell again twice and realized that she couldn't walk anymore, so crawled around to feed and toilet Arthur. After these what seemed monumental tasks, she lay down exhausted on her back concrete pavers, both she and Arthur resting in the sun. She knew that she should move, but was unable to organise herself. Then something changed. Louise said that it was like the air felt different. It was now about midday, and she had been outside for over an hour. All of a sudden, she could hear her dad's voice talking to her in her mind. He was not speaking out aloud for anyone to hear, but it was his voice clear in her mind. Calm and chatty, but definitely out to get her attention. Interestingly, Louise noticed that this was not the quavery-sounding 86-year-old dad that she had last seen 2 months ago, but a much younger-sounding dad from 20 or 30 years back. He sounded positively young and sprightly. "Come on, mate," he said, using a frequent term of endearment in their conversations. "We need to get you some help now." Louise had never had any communication from the other side, apart from a dream long ago after a friend's death, but this experience was different. She was wide awake, and there was no room for interpretation. This was clearly her dad, who normally she would have asked 100 questions. However, he had definitely come to help her, and she respected that. Strangely, she was not startled nor frightened at all, just comforted by his presence, as she would have been were he speaking to her in life. For most of this conversation, it was not a backwards and forwards type chat. It was like he was coaching her, and she was silent for the most part, just trying to do what he told her to do. She smiles now to think that she had always been a bit of a daddy's girl, and imagines that her mum would have made him come to talk to her that day, knowing that Louise wouldn't argue with him. She'd just do what he said. However, Louise remembers that at this point she distinctly thought a response back to him saying, "I'm just a bit tired, Dad. I need to rest a bit longer." "I know, mate," he replied, "but we've got to get you inside and to get you some help now. So come on, over onto your all fours. We're going to have to crawl inside. Open the door now. Good girl. Right, now you move through it. That's right, leave Arthur outside for the minute." Suddenly Louise was inside the house again, with Arthur safe in the yard. "Now I think we'd better get you a drink before we do anything else. So let's go to the cupboard under the stairs." Slowly Louise crawled across the kitchen floor while he gave her directions, which she couldn't have thought out for herself as she was so sick by that stage. "Come on, up to the end of the bench." "That's it, mate. Now turn left and we're almost into the lounge room." When she finally got to the cupboard under the stairs, he said, "Now get that Coke out of the box. Good girl." Here Louise commented that it's funny how when you're in your 50s, your dad can still call you a good girl and it doesn't raise a frown. She did get the Coke, but as she opened it, it tipped over. She was so disappointed because she was extremely dehydrated from her condition and knew she needed it. She still couldn't problem solve and make herself get out another can by that stage, so she just sat there momentarily heartbroken as it spilled. "Lou," he said, grabbing her attention again, "quick, mate, don't let it all come out. Straighten that can up. That's right, now have your drink." She did and felt much better for it. Her dad didn't tell her then in words to get help, but he must have sent her the thoughts somehow. Without organising any thoughts on her part, she used Siri on her Apple Watch. She called her brother at work, and he was switched onto the situation immediately. He had rung their cousin within 2 minutes, and then rang Louise back to tell her that they would be there within 10. After she hung up, her dad was back on the line, as it were. "Now, mate," he said, "we've got to get that chain off the door. I know it's a high reach, but you can do it." She dragged herself to the front door and reached up for the offending chain, getting it off at his direction. "Now, let's unlock that security door also," was his next instruction, and somehow she managed to do that too. After that, he didn't say anything more, but she knew he was still with her, watching and waiting until her cousin's car pulled into the driveway. Louise didn't feel the need to talk, she was just sure of his presence. Soon after her cousin's arrival, the ambulance was on its way. When Louise got to the hospital an hour later, the doctors assured her that she would likely die that afternoon. She was not allowing resuscitation nor a ventilator and refused dialysis, so with her kidney function on 10, there was little hope. Despite the doctor's annoyance with her, she sensed something being communicated to from another dimension. She just knew that there was no chance she would die that afternoon. Her mum and dad were watching over her, and it was not her time yet. In an afternote, Louise added that a few months later she went to a medium. She told the medium nothing about this incident, but did say, "Can you please ask Dad if he was with me on December 14th last year?" "Yes," came back the reply. "He was coaching you across your kitchen to get you help for something." Then, apparently, her mum butted in. She communicated, "But he missed your first fall. I was watching you. I had to go and get your father, so he only saw the last 2 falls." Louise was left wondering where he was at the time, playing a round of golf, chatting to her uncle, doing a crossword. Maybe he was at work with her brother. Whatever else she could be sure of, he obviously still comes at her mum's beck and call. You're special. Justin Pierce, who lives in Portsmouth, UK, was around 8 years old when he experienced this spiritual encounter. He was sitting on his bed in his room at around 7 p.m. one evening with his door slightly open when a man he did not know walked into the room. The man was wearing a blue uniform with a wings patch on the front pocket. He spoke to Justin and told him that his name was James Saunders. He then told Justin that he had come to see him to tell him something, that Justin was here to help others and was special. Justin thought that the man was a friend of his dad's, as his father used to be a Navy officer. And at that stage, his only concern was that he would tell his dad that he was still up. Then, before he could ask the million questions in his head, the man just vanished into thin air. The encounter scared Justin so much that he wouldn't go into his room for a few days. He didn't sleep all that night, nor for several more nights, and remembers that he was always scared of his room after that. At the age of 13, when in a military memorabilia shop in Portsmouth, he stumbled upon the uniform that his late-night guest had been wearing when Justin saw him. He discovered it was a World War II Royal Air Force uniform and not from the Royal Navy as he had assumed. At his local library, he was able to uncover that James Saunders had indeed been an RAF pilot and had been shot down during the later years of the war at the age of 27. Fast forward 20 years, and Justin became a psychic medium, a self-described reluctant medium who does help people with their grieving, as well as being a healer. After this first spirit encounter, he continued trying to find out about James, up until 2 years ago when his mum did a DNA test for Ancestry.com. His mother had never known her father, who was 42 years older than his grandmother and married. She found some family members of her father living in Canada. They sent some information about her father, who had a brother-in-law called James Saunders. He was an airman in the Second World War. The family sent a photograph of James, and it was the spirit Justin had connected with all those years ago. The distant relative had passed on a truly positive and life-affirming message to Justin.